let's talk about something that affects every single one of us, whether we realize it or not: gender inequality. Now, this isn't just about opinions. It's about the invisible architecture of our world. The hidden rules that shape our opportunities, our expectations, and even our health. So let's start peeling back some of those layers. I want to start with just one single number that kind of frames this whole conversation: 90%. A global survey by the UN found that nearly 90% of everyone, and that's men and women, holds at least one bias against women. This isn't some fringe belief. It's a foundational global norm that we really have to grapple with. Okay, so before we go any further, we've got to get two critical terms straight. On one hand, you have sex, which is about our biological classification. But then you have gender, and that's all about the social script, the roles, the behaviors, and the expectations that society attaches to being female or male. And it's that social idea, gender, with its very real consequences, that we're going to be focusing on. So, just how widespread is this gendered inequality? Well, the data is crystal clear. Despite decades of progress, not one single country on the entire planet has achieved full gender equality. It's a totally universal challenge, even if the details look a little different from one culture to the next. Now, of course, some countries are closing that gap way faster than others. Get this, for an incredible 14 years in a row, the World Economic Forum has ranked Iceland as the most gender-equal nation on Earth. And its Nordic neighbors, like Norway and Finland, are always right there behind them. They consistently lead the pack in things like political empowerment and economic opportunity for everybody. All right, so where does a global power like the United States fit into all this? This might actually surprise you. Out of 146 countries, the US ranks 43rd. Yeah, 43rd. That puts it behind countries like Germany, Nicaragua, and even Lithuania. So the big question is, why? Let's break that number down, because the details here are really revealing. The US actually does okay in economic participation. It's ranked 21st. But just look at where it drops off a cliff. 59th in educational attainment, a really shocking 78th in health and survival, and 63rd in political empowerment. That overall rank of 43 is hiding some really gape-seated weaknesses. And this brings us to a really critical idea. This inequality we're seeing, it isn't just about individual attitudes. It's about something called structural sexism, the idea that our institutions themselves, from our workplaces to our legal systems, are actually designed in ways that systematically put people at a disadvantage just based on their gender.
The formal definition is the ways the organization of society and its institutions subordinate individuals based on their sex classification. But here's a much simpler way to think about it. It's the blueprint of the building itself, not just the attitudes of the people walking around inside it. It's baked into the system.
Let's make this real with one of the most famous examples, the gender pay gap. In the United States, a woman working full-time still earns, on average, just 84 cents for every single dollar a man makes. And that's not because of a few bad managers. It's a predictable outcome of the way the system is structured. So what does that 16-cent gap actually add up to over a lifetime? Well, for the average woman, it means a career earnings loss of over $400,000. Just think about that for a second. That is a staggering amount of lost wealth that doesn't just impact one person, but it can affect entire families for generations. So how does this actually happen? Well, it's because of a set of invisible barriers that are built right into the system. You have occupational sex segregation, which basically funnels men and women into different kinds of jobs that just happen to have very different pay scales. Then there's the famous glass ceiling, which blocks the path to the very top. You've got the motherhood penalty, where having a kid impacts a woman's career way more than a man's, and something called structured choice, which basically means the options available to women are often already limited before they even get a chance to choose. Okay, so if the structures are the how all this works, our next section is all about the why. We're talking about the cultural code. These are the unwritten roles we all just kind of absorb from birth that teach us what it means and what it takes to be seen as a proper woman or a real man. At the very heart of this cultural code are what we call gender roles. Basically, these are the socially defined behaviors and expectations we link to being male or female. And let's be super clear, these are not biological facts. They are social scripts that we're all handed and then taught how to perform. Want to see one of the most powerful gender roles in action? Look no further than unpaid labor. Check out the global average. Women perform over 4.5 hours of unpaid work. We're talking childcare, housework, every single day. For men, it's less than 2 hours.
This is the famous second shift, and believe it or not, it happens even in households where the woman is the main breadwinner.
So this raises a huge question for sociologists. Why does this second shift even exist? Is it just a practical thing about who has more time available? Or is it driven by something deeper, by an ideology that says this is just what women are supposed to do? Well, the evidence overwhelmingly points to that ideology playing a massive role. And we learn this cultural code from a really, really young age. Studies show that male characters still dominate the books we read to our kids. The media, from TV shows to video games, is just filled with gender stereotypes. And in the classroom, research shows that even the most well-meaning teachers tend to be more responsive to boys, calling on them more often, giving them more detailed feedback. And this isn't just some abstract theory we're talking about. These really rigid gender roles have a profound human cost, and it's a cost paid by everyone, not just women. Just look at this devastating data on youth mental health. In U.S. high schools, 57% of girls report feeling persistently sad or hopeless. But this pressure harms boys too. A deeply concerning 29% of them report the exact same thing. These gendered pressures are creating a real mental health crisis for our young people.
A key driver behind this is what sociologist William Pollock called the boy code. It's basically the unwritten rulebook for traditional masculinity. You gotta be tough, be stoic, be self-reliant. But what that means in practice is that boys are taught not to show emotion, and maybe most importantly, not to ask for help. And the consequences of that code, they're devastating. Men become less likely to go see a doctor for preventative care. They're more likely to engage in risky, self-destructive behaviors. And tragically, this all contributes to higher rates of what are called deaths of despair, from suicide, alcohol, and drug overdoses. But here's the thing. These structures and these codes have never gone unchallenged. For generations, people have been pushing back. And that brings us to our final section, the ongoing and often really difficult struggle for equality. You can trace this fight right across modern history. It really ignited with second-wave feminism back in the 60s and 70s. It saw a huge legislative push with the Equal Rights Amendment in 1972, which actually passed Congress but was never ratified by enough states. It absolutely exploded into public consciousness with the #MeToo movement in 2017. And today, that struggle is facing a powerful and organized backlash from anti-gender movements. And that brings us right to where we are at this very moment. A lot of hard-won progress is now under threat. In the U.S., we're seeing the active dismantling of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And at the same time, a well-funded global movement is working to roll back protections for women and for transgender people. The fight is far, far from over. So all of this leaves us with a final and pretty urgent question. We know that gender is a social idea, but its consequences, from our paychecks to our mental health, are profoundly real. And our understanding of gender is evolving faster than ever. So the challenge for all of us is this. What is it going to take for our laws, our institutions, and our cultural code to finally catch up?